So as Bostonians are playing bookstops today, Marina opened, I'm closing. Thank you very much for the invite. The previous session said a lot of the things that I wanted to say about startups. I'm not going to focus on startups as much. I'm going to take you back a little bit to a more optimistic view of things. I grew up in Chania. I left Greece about 26 years ago to go to graduate school in Boston, and I stayed there. It happens very often. A few notes. I remember when the GDP of Greece, when I was growing up, the GDP of Greece was about 5 times less than what it is now after the crisis. I went to a school, to a public school in Greece, where we had 42 people per class, and we had to work double shifts. When there was somebody sick, when its sickness was getting past a certain stage, they had to be airlifted to Athens, even from Crete. Back in those days, thankfully for us, we were next to a very big major Air Force base in Suda. So what I can see, and what I can see as an amateur student of history, is that we have been doing pretty well as a country. And occasionally we hit some potholes in the process. Some of them, all of them, looking back, in hindsight, were avoidable. The important thing is in hindsight. So we need to be a little bit more, I think, optimistic, and I think we have to have a more, especially us who live abroad and who don't have to deal with the difficulties and certain things that annoy us in Greece. We have to be a little bit more optimistic, and we have to be more optimistic ambassadors of Greece abroad. We, myself and a lot of other people, have no right to complain about Greece, at least externally. Maybe amongst ourselves we can complain all that we want, but outside we have to do our job and be ambassadors for our country. Earlier this year, there was a big uptick, especially in the spring, in the arrivals in the Eleftherios Venizelos airport in Athens. And in the beginning, everybody thought that we were going to have a tremendously good tourist period. Turns out that it wasn't really tourists. It was people who had recently moved abroad and who were visiting for weekends. It's normal. People in the US do it all the time. When they lose their job in one state, they move to another. Nevertheless, we continue in Greece to treat diaspora as our grandmother's diaspora. Oh, our kids left. It's very characteristic. Greece is a country of adolescence. That's the problem. We are eternally adolescents. We leave, if we ever leave, our mommy for the embrace of a very paternalistic state. Up until now, we can't fund that state anymore. I tend to split the people who are leaving Greece right now in 2 categories. The people who had never left Greece before, in which case I will abandon what I had thought brain drain to brain train, and I will use Mr. Makrignotis' term, brain charge. I like that. Because the people, especially recent graduates who leave Greece right now, are sort of destroyed in the brain. This is what they see. This is their university. This is my university. This is where I graduated from. It's normal to them. Actually, 20 years after I took my degree from Thessaloniki, I went and I gave a speech there in the same room that the graduation happened. And my professors were very proud of the big, heavy metal doors that they had in their offices, which made their offices impenetrable to the anarchists, leftists, etc., whoever wants to occupy the university for whatever reason they want. Also, Greece is ground zero for infectious stupidity. Propagated by something I wholeheartedly believe in and I worked all of my life for, the internet. If it's written on the internet, it must be true. We laugh, it's not funny. I mean, after all we have passed, you see how Soros is having a resurgence in Greece right now. It is a problem. And it is a problem that us can have a very large effect upon. We need to try to solve that problem. We need to fight misinformation. Overall, though, the thing, if I wanted to describe it in a single sentence, the thing that lacks from Greece is civic capital. We don't cooperate very well with each other. We are very good as units. We do very well in established environments, but we don't cooperate very well. And what is civic capital, in one sentence, is the collection of values and institutions that promote cooperation within a society in general. I Googled the word for a definition, and the first thing that came up in the video section, which was Elias's talk from TEDx Academy a few years back, which I wholeheartedly recommend. It's a very good talk. How do we enhance those values? There is a big elephant in the room, which everybody tries to dance around. And that's the role of the government and civil society in general. In Greece, we tend to think of the government as this monolithic monopoly of power. Turns out that in modern societies, you have many centers of power, and you have contributions from both individual citizens and businesses. They all are part of civil society. I tend to do other things. I try to change the opinion of people. I realized that that's what I have been doing in our lab by doing demos. If an idea is kind of hard for people to comprehend, we build something that demonstrates it at the Media Lab. Actually, our motto used to be demo or die for over 20 years. We don't like to publish as much, which works very well for me. I hate writing, so I don't have to publish at all, and I can still be a research scientist. We like to build things. So the most elaborate demo I had the privilege of being part of a few years back was the $100 laptop, where we had to address the fact that we couldn't give computers to schools. They were too expensive. So price of the computer was about $1,000 on the average back then. We thought it could be a lot lower. We went out. We said that we are going to build one for $100. Everybody said, you are crazy. We did it. We distribute 2 million of them. Right now, you can buy a laptop for $200, a tablet for a lot less, but more importantly, nobody discusses whether there should be one computer per kid in schools as opposed to these computer labs, these horrible computer labs of the older days. That's a done thing. We can do similar things at a smaller scale. The thing that annoys me in Greece, a pet peeve of mine is the parking situation and how people think that because they have a car, somebody is supposed to provide them with a space for it. I like these guys. They go over there and they distribute stickers, and they put stickers on top of illegally parked cars like that guy down there, with whom we happily distribute the picture with his license plate, because that's another example up there from Chania. Some guy stopped in the middle of a street that it's a very narrow street, Eleftheriou Venizelou, went out to get some bread, cut the traffic in the middle of the day. Somebody complained to him with a motorcycle and he beat him. Thankfully, somebody was filming that on the other motorcycle. So he posted that and I sent that video to the director of the traffic police in Chania. And the guy called the other guy and had a very nice discussion with him. And I'm sure that that guy will think twice before he does what he did again. So you can do things, you can change things. The fact, the normal that we all learned how to live with in our advanced cocoons around here, it's something that we have to enforce to all of our friends and family and community in Greece too. We shouldn't have a different normal for Greece. If we have to do one thing for Greece, is not to have a different normal. The normal that exists here is what is normal for there too. The myth of the Greek exceptionality is a myth. Everything that works here can work there. We have all these issues with the transport, etc., etc. We still cannot open transport in Greece because, oh, it's a special case and we have all these families that were supported, and yes, still the tomatoes from Holland are cheaper in Athens than the tomatoes from Greece because of that, because we're a special case. That's another guy. That's my favorite guy in Greece, the favorite activist. He has this site where he debunks all those myths that are out there. He does a very good job. Now, you know, he's not a professor, he's just a hobbyist, but he has done a lot of good with these things. I follow his site very closely. Some good things, as we said before. We have good human capital. We don't have, that's the tragedy and the nice thing, we don't have to be innovative all the time. I mean, we have so many efficiency to gain by just applying all the toolboxes that we heard today. OECD has one. Dimitri Vaiano has one. Obviously, if the solutions are so simple, and we know they're not simple to apply, but they are very simple as ideas, and we all know them, we can do much, much better. This is an interesting slide. This is the ranking of developer quality. And the thing that's important here is that our developers are much better than the developers that the traditional countries where outsourcing happens. Unsolicited pitch. Thessaloniki is starting an effort in their innovation zone. So, you know, one concrete way to help, if you have a development project, take it there. Call these guys, talk to them. They might be able to help you jumpstart your startup. But as many people said, you can use your network, leverage your network to scale up a new startup. But most importantly, continue to be engaged citizens. We are not going to grow Greece by bypassing institutions, by disparaging all politicians and absconding of our civic responsibility to select who is, if you can find somebody likable, who is the least unlikable, We saw the burn, bordello parliament movement, be partly in government with no real solutions. We really have to be involved again. The reason that we went into and fall into that pothole, the latest pothole, is that we were not watching. And we are not going to move forward by just bypassing that. Unless we raise the quality of our politics in Greece, unless we support the people who are really going to do something useful, politics is not something that people should take as a hobby. Selling ideas is an art that also requires you to have them. And we keep forgetting these things, and without being engaged, and now for us it is easy to be engaged. For the older times, for the older versions of the diaspora, this was impossible. We don't have any excuse not to be engaged and to contribute in any way we can. Thank you very much.